A viewer forced me to read a book that wasn't on my TBR, that I didn't expect to enjoy, and basically, I discovered I had really good justifications for not having this book on my TBR. Did not really enjoy the 450 pages after. Really, like the last 300 pages or so, I barely cared for anything in this book. Where the amount of side quests, and in my opinion, ridiculous side quests we were taken on was just too much for me. Now, if you didn't know, then I've recently launched a Viking book club where basically people on my tier 3 and 4 can put books forward, and then I randomly choose one book per month to read. And for the last month, out of all the books that were put forward, there was one book that wasn't on my TBR that I wasn't particularly excited about. And faithful to have it that I actually picked that book. And that book is Kings of the Wyld by Nicholas Eames. And also make sure to stay to the end, because at the end I'll reveal what book we're gonna be reading together in the month of October, which is again a book I'm excited about, but a book that wasn't really on my TBR. And I do apologize if this video becomes a bit like ranty or rumbling or whatever, because I haven't really written a script for this one, but I just want to share my honest thought about Kings of the Wyld. Now, if you haven't heard about this book, that this is an immensely popular fantasy book that is the first book in a trilogy, but all the 3 books are actually standalone, so you can definitely read this one, and you don't have to read any of the other books, because I believe book 2 follows a totally new cast of characters, which is quite a good idea. And this book is very, very popular. I mean, a lot of people rave about it, and the main reason why this book wasn't on my TBR is because a lot of people say that this is a very fun, action-packed book, and I've just come to know that if a book is very, very fun, lighthearted, and has this type of humor where, I don't know how to explain it. Basically, if a lot of the jokes are jokes I would have laughed at when I was like a teenager, then usually those books don't work for me. So some of the examples is like Discworld, absurdist humor I don't really enjoy, The Great Codes or The Black Tongue Thief, and now Kings of the Wyld all have this type of light-hearted, relatively clean humor, and it just doesn't vibe with me. Or even like Sanderson in Miss Bonera 2, that humor doesn't work with me, and it's usually a big turn off when a book has that kind of tone, and that is a reason why I didn't have this book on my TBR. But a patron of mine put this book forward, it was randomly chosen, and I had to read it. And having finally read this book has definitely taught me and cemented that this type of stories are just simply not for me. Now, that is not to say that this is a bad book by any means. Actually, I really have to emphasize that if you look at what Nicholas Eames is trying to accomplish with this story, then I think that overall he does a phenomenal job at accomplishing exactly what he set out to do. So I do feel kind of bad of like criticizing or like ranting about this book, because if you think about his intentions for the story, I think he basically nailed all of them, which is a reason why I hope that some of you watching this review are actually gonna look at this and gonna be like, this sounds like a story for me. But let's get a bit more into this, and this will be totally spoiler free, so don't worry about that. But I just want to give you like a sense of what kind of story we're looking at here, and then I'll get more into what I liked and also what I didn't like. And I also do apologize, this video might become a bit long, but I have so much to say, so let's get into it. So in the first chapter of Kings of the Wyld, we're basically introduced to this Clay Cooper, who is this guy on the front page with this massive shield. And we get to know that Clay Cooper, he's a large man, he has huge hands, and now he has a normal job. So right from the get-go, we meet this retired warrior, and he used to be scary and epic and have a massive reputation in this world we're crafted in. But now he's retired from all of that, and he's living a normal life, and even has a wife, and his life is basically very, very comfortable. Now, then we get to chapter 2, and now we're introduced to Gabriel, who is a friend of Clay. And Clay and Gabriel basically used to be in this band together back in the day, so Gabriel is also like this esteemed warrior. And it's very, very clear that Gabriel here, which I'm actually not sure who he is, and maybe it's this character here, he longs for those glory days where band was together, they were having huge battles. And we also hear that the wife of Clay, she kind of blames Gabriel for being the one that gets Clay into a lot of troubles. So we can definitely already now see that we have a character that's more relaxed, more like thinks deeply about things and has to make like the right choice, like settle down. But then we also have Gabriel, who has settled down but is longing for something more. He's longing for those glory days. But it is in chapter 2 already that we hear about the main premise of this book. Gabriel says that his daughter has been captured in this battle far, far away, and she is in dire, dire danger, and he is going to get her back. He is going to save her life, and he's asking Clay, you should come with me. And Clay is initially very like against this. He's like, no, I'm not gonna go. Those days are behind me. But everything changes basically when Clay talks to his daughter Kelly, and Kelly's like, well, you would have saved me, wouldn't you, if I was in danger? So you should definitely go and help out your friend Gabriel. So right from the first 3 chapters, I was actually very surprised, because I thought that this was gonna be a like very like hilarious read already from the get-go. But in the first 3 chapters, there's just so much heart. There's a lot of emotions. We have these fathers that have like, they love their children, but they have made the right choices for their wives, for their lives, and so on. And really, I was really surprised when I read the first 3 chapters, because as I said, it felt like the story had a lot of heart, which I really appreciated. And also the tone wasn't too over the top or too ridiculous as like Terry Pratchett sometimes gets. So that was a major plus. I actually really enjoyed the first 3 chapters. So basically we now have Clay and Gabriel, who is now, they're starting to slowly form this band of, I think it was 5 primary characters. So they go out, they collect some of these magical artifacts they used to have, and they meet up with Cal. So this is still very early on, like in page 40 or something, so I wouldn't really consider this a spoiler. But basically when they meet Cal, there's this confrontation and it doesn't really work out, so they leave him. But then they meet Mook, is that how I pronounce it? You can kind of see him, he's a wizard here at the end, and he was maybe my favorite characters here, because again, talking about having heart in the story, having compassion, Mook has basically been focusing on creating a cure for a disease called the rot. So the rot is almost like this disease that it's basically like the Black Death, in my opinion. It kills a lot of people. There's no cure, and he's even lost his spells because of the rot. And again, I think it was just brilliant that Nicholas Eames, he introduces these characters one by one, and instead of going straight on this mission, we actually get a bit of their backstory, and we get slightly more like emotionally attached to them. So again, it's a brilliant way. He could have started the story by having all of them together in the same place, but I'm so glad he didn't. But he slowly introduced the characters one by one. And again, we're now at page around 100, so there's still definitely a lot of things I haven't mentioned here, but Eames has done a brilliant job at this point to introduce the characters slowly and give you reasons to really care for them. So in my opinion, the first 100 pages are very strong, and also Eames has an accessible writing style. The pacing is spot on, and we have this mission. We are going to save Gabriel's daughter. We're bringing back the band together, and oh, also I have to mention, we then meet Matt, and I'm not actually sure who Matt is here. It's probably very obvious, but I've forgotten which weapon he had. And he's basically a king when we meet him, but he doesn't want to be a king. He hates his wife. He believes his wife has been cheating on him, and all their kids are not his kids. It's absolutely hilarious, and he just wants to escape from it. So we have all of these different characters that used to be together, but are now like totally separate, and I just loved hearing those background stories to all of them. It just worked brilliantly for me the first 100 pages, so that is a big plus. But it is at this point, at around page 100, that in my opinion, the story became exactly what I expected it to be, but that is not necessarily a good thing for me, because I did not really enjoy the 450 pages after. So let's talk about why I didn't enjoy them. And I do apologize if this becomes slightly ranty here, but I just have a lot of things to say. Now, if you ask me, what are some of your pet peeves, some of the things that you really dislike in fantasy? And obviously with any pet peeve, a really good author can pull like a trope off that I hate. But for example, I would have mentioned love triangles, insta-love, which this book doesn't have, but I would also have mentioned unnecessary side quests. I hate, or maybe that's a strong word, because I love Wheel of Time, and it does definitely have some of those unnecessary side quests. But basically, when we are introduced to a story, and when I feel like an author is introducing side quests just to add more pages, that is a major pet peeve for me. Now, when it comes to this book, we're introduced to this very honorable and heartfelt quest at the beginning. We need to save Gabriel's daughter, and I was actually all on board with this. But then from page around 100 to the very last page, we're basically taken on this massive journey where the amount of side quests, and in my opinion, ridiculous side quests we were taken on, was just too much for me. I mean, we meet like cannibals and we meet demons, and it is literally like reading a D&D campaign, which again, I'm not gonna say that is a necessarily a bad thing, because I think Nicholas Eames, he pulls off what he's trying to pull off with this book. But man, I was reading this book and I was just thinking, were we supposed to save someone's daughter? Like, what happened to that overarching quest? And again, Nicholas Eames, he does justify, like, they meet this trouble on the way, so it's not really their fault, but it just felt like, yeah, one of those, as John Gwynne calls it, a rollicking, page-turning, edge-of-your-seat road trip of a book. It definitely feels like a road trip, a D&D campaign, and oh man, there were just too many side quests. It was fun, but I don't do fun, so that was definitely a major, like, turn-off for me. And then just, I think the humor really got heightened. The more you get into the book, the more the characters like make these funny jokes that just didn't hit with me at all. And really, like the last 300 pages or so, I barely cared for anything in this book. Like I just wanted to be over as soon as possible or get to where we actually saw them trying to save the daughter. And here it is again, which I think is quite unfortunate because what I really wanted, and it's gonna be no spoilers again, but I didn't get the ending that I really wanted. But I do have to mention, I think the epilogue was actually really good, surprisingly, which is weird because I didn't really enjoy the 300 pages in between, but the epilogue was actually reasonably good, which I really enjoyed. But having read this book has really taught me that these types of stories are just not for me. I need my stories to be a bit more serious in tone, have less side quests, and the humor, like this book, humor is at its forefront. This is one of the main reasons why people will love this book, because it has a lot of humor. It's relatively lighthearted. It's just chaotic. But then we have behind me the First Law universe, which I know a lot of people say that Joe Abercrombie is a very funny author, and he is. But the main difference between the First Law and Kings of the Wyld, which are so separate, is that Abercrombie, he is writing a dark and grim story, but he sprinkles just a tiny bit of humor in the perfect moments just to release some of the tension we have in the stories. So while a lot of the humor is funny in the First Law, it's not really the main focus. That is not the same thing here. So it's a bit unfortunate that before I picked up this book, I expected to give it 3 stars, and having read this book, I'll probably give it 2.5 when it comes to enjoyment. When it comes to how Nicholas Eames pulls off the execution of the story, it is definitely maybe a solid 4 or 4.5 if you like this type of quest fantasies with a lot of humor and fast pace and chaotic world building. But for me, this ultimately just didn't work. But what I will say here is that I'm actually really glad that I did pick up this book and that I did launch the Viking book club, because this is going to force me to read some books that are not on my TBR, and I'm really excited about the next book we're gonna be reading next month, which I did mention is a book that I didn't really have on my TBR, and I did post a video on my Patreon where I did the random drawing, so it was definitely randomized. But the book we're going to be reading next month is City of Brass by S.A. Chakraborty, an incredibly famous modern fantasy series that I haven't really read. Well, I haven't read it at all actually, and I've heard mostly really great things about that book, so I'm really excited about that one. Mel, one of my patrons, she was the fortunate one to be having her book picked for October. So if you want to join the read-alongs for City of Brass, you can join my Patreon on tier 2. Or if you want to even be the one that puts book forward, it's tier 3 or 4. But I'll leave a link in the description down below if you're interested. But yeah, I hope you'll join us for the read-along for next month. And I hope you enjoyed this rambling / ranty review of Kings of the Wyld. I really hope that a lot of you that are watching this are gonna think, oh, actually, I should really check out this book. So thank you so much for watching, and God bless.
Hey guys, thank you so much for watching this video all the way to the end. I hope you enjoyed this video and got some inspiration to read more books. Now, if you want to support me in any way, then you can check out my Patreon. I have different tiers and you'll get different benefits depending on what tier you support. Some of the benefits include getting your name in my videos, voting rights on my next feed, getting a special role on my Discord server, getting access to one Patreon exclusive video a month, or even art cards and bookmarks signed by my wife and me. Most of the money goes to hiring an editor to do a couple of videos for me a month, which basically allows me to post high quality content more frequently. But yeah, thank you so much for watching, and God bless.